Imagine a time when Black artists, musicians, and writers transformed American culture, when creativity flourished and a new cultural identity emerged. This was the Harlem Renaissance, a movement that reshaped literature, music, and the arts in the 1920s. But what made Harlem the epicenter of this cultural explosion? Let's explore. Harlem Renaissance. The Harlem Renaissance was an African-American cultural movement that took place primarily in the 1920s, with Harlem, New York City, as its symbolic capital. Also known as the New Negro Movement, it provided Black artists, writers, musicians, and intellectuals a space to express themselves freely and redefine how the world saw African Americans. This was more than an artistic movement. It was a fight for representation and pride in Black identity. Through literature, music, theater, and visual arts, Black artists took control of their own narratives, challenging stereotypes and celebrating African American culture. The factors that led to the Harlem Renaissance. Several historical factors contributed to the rise of the Harlem Renaissance. Let's break them down. One of the biggest catalysts was the Great Migration. Between 1910 and 1920, hundreds of thousands of African Americans moved from the South to northern cities like New York, Chicago, and Philadelphia, seeking economic opportunities and freedom from racial violence. By 1960, over 5 million African Americans had relocated, bringing their culture and traditions with them. As African Americans settled in cities like Harlem, they developed a new cultural identity, shifting from social disillusionment to racial pride. Alain Locke, a Harvard-educated writer and critic, called it a spiritual coming of age, as Black artists embraced their history and folk traditions in their work. The Harlem Renaissance was also fueled by Black intellectuals and artists who saw the arts as a means of fighting racial injustice. It was a literary, artistic, and intellectual movement that brought Black experiences into the heart of American cultural history. The artistic explosion in Harlem. The Harlem Renaissance spanned many art forms: poetry, prose, painting, sculpture, jazz, opera, and dance. But what united these works was a focus on the Black experience and a strong assertion of civil and political rights. Let's take a closer look at the key figures who made this era so impactful. Many incredible artists and intellectuals emerged from this movement. Here are just a few. Intellectuals: W.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, Cyril Briggs, and Walter Francis White. Performers: Josephine Baker and Paul Robeson. Writers and poets: Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, Effie Lee Newsom, and Countee Cullen. Visual artists: Aaron Douglas and Augusta Savage. Musicians: Louis Armstrong, Count Basie, Eubie Blake, Cab Calloway, Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday, Ivy Anderson, Fats Waller, and Jelly Roll Morton. Each of these artists used their talents to reshape how Black culture was seen in America and around the world. The impact of the Harlem Renaissance. At its height, Harlem was the cultural capital of Black America, home to African American-owned publishing houses, newspapers, music companies, playhouses, nightclubs, and cabarets. The impact of the Harlem Renaissance was not confined to Harlem. It shaped American culture on a national and global scale. The influence of the Harlem Renaissance can still be seen today. From hip-hop to contemporary Black literature, the movement laid the foundation for generations of artists who continue to challenge, inspire, and redefine culture. The Harlem Renaissance was more than just a cultural movement. It was a revolution in thought, identity, and artistic expression.